Today, I want to share with you my thoughts on how positive and negative thinking hamper the creativity. Positive and negative thinking may be very useful from many standpoint, but from creativity standpoint, uh, these may not be the right thinking habits or practices or tendencies. If you look at what is meant by positive or negative thinking, let me fall back to Google. And here, if I see what is meant by positive thinking, so it says that positive thinking or an optimistic attitude is the practice of focusing on the good in any given situation. So this is focusing on the good. So there is a focus on the good, which means that something is being ignored. So from creativity standpoint, one has to have a courage not to ignore anything. The courage is required so that there is nothing like good or bad. You should be able to look at it without worrying. It's not about the optimistic attitude. It's about not ignoring anything. Similarly, if I look at negative thinking, negative thinking. So it says that negative thoughts include beliefs, negative beliefs that you might have about yourself, situations, or others. Right? What happens in negative thinking? And negative thinking makes you feel blue about the world. Right? So we don't look at the world the way it is about yourself, about the future. So when the element of future comes in, we are not present or we are not one with the current situation we are dealing with. Our mind, a part of our mind or consciousness or attention has gone to something in future. We are not currently available completely to the situation. So why we are saying that creativity requires complete understanding? Because positive and negative thinking both are excluding something from the situation, from the subject. Subject is not able to look at the situation fully. What are the common tendencies from, and now I'm coming to the skill part to learn creativity, or how we can bring creativity in our being. To learn the skill part, I studied some literature and found that I would like to bank upon an Indian rishi called Patanjali. He was a medical scientist of India. I believe it was more than 3,000 years ago when he used to conduct medical experiments, and he had authored the scripture called Patanjali Yogsutra. In that, Patanjali mentions 5 key tendencies. And as per my point of view or understanding, these are the ones which strangulate our creativity. So if we need to be creative, we should be conscious of such tendencies. The first tendency mentioned is in Hindi, it is called Praman. Now, what is Praman? Praman is the tendency to find cause in each and every situation. Once we know that this is the cause of the situation, of bad situation or good situation, we feel that, or we draw conclusion, we get settled that we have understood the situation. It's a big fallacy. For a creative person, I'm not saying we should not look for causes. Do look at it, but don't be slave to the causes, because causes at times can be just non-scientific way of saying something. We may say that uh, that banks are finding it difficult to do business or grow in COVID situation, right? So if banks are not growing, then COVID may be the situation. So this may be a tendency to arrive at a cause. Now, a creative person need to set this aside and look at what are the problems why banks are not rising or growing, or for that matter, any enterprise. I'm just taking example. So come out of this tendency. The second tendency is the tendency to imagine. Here, the person, instead of looking at the situation holistically, what I mean to say, completely concentrating on the situation, giving full attention, instead the person starts imagining what can happen, right? A positive thinker can start imagining what good can happen. So at the cost of being engrossed in the situation to understand it fully. The third tendency is called vikalp. This is the tendency to live in words rather than reality. So for example, in my industry, I belong to IT industry, and data is the new oil. Many of us do not understand this and they use such cliche. So we just live in words. We are just collecting data. So we think that if banks are not growing in the revenue, probably they are not looking at the data and they want to jump to this conclusion. Let's look at the data. Again, I'm not saying that creative person doesn't have to look on, does have to ignore data. No, I'm saying just be aware that that we move away from understanding the situation, being with the situation, applying the presence. We somewhere go to some concept or idea and live in the word. We live in those concepts. So it's living in the concepts. The fourth tendency is the nidra. This is the tendency is that we are blind to the situation. We do not look at the facts available. And then we escape to some alternative. Fifth tendency is the smriti, the tendency to remain slave of the past. So whatever has happened in the past to us, that makes us slave of ours in the present situation, and we do not understand the current situation at hand. And the root tendency is the tendency of I, the ego, where we see ego is something looking at the situation from the perspective of what benefit I would draw from this, or what kind of a threat I can get from this. So thinking from the center of the ego, that again does not allow us to look at the situation completely. Net, the purpose of mentioning these tendencies is that unless the person is directing the attention completely to the situation at hand, The intellect cannot operate. The mind, human mind, the way its biology is, either it goes into the past, that how the things has happened in the past, or it goes into hope in future. It doesn't look at, it doesn't sustain itself in the present situation. Creativity comes in when we direct our attention to the situation at hand, applying the presence. Thank you very much.